You're on mute, Raúl.
Thank you.
There you go. Somebody said they have a coffee cup now with "you're on mute" on it. You just hold it.
That's very useful.
Yes.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for being here. Hello and welcome to tonight's City Club of Boise evening conversation about the future of the Idaho Republican Party. I'm Dr. Jen Schneider, City Club of Boise board member, interim associate dean of the School of Public Service, and professor of public policy and administration at Boise State University. I'm also tonight's moderator. This program is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel, and the audio will be provided to our media partner, Boise State Public Radio. City Club of Boise brings people together to explore community issues and hear diverse viewpoints by creating spaces where conversations happen. This is possible through the support of our members and sponsors, and for this we say thank you. Our premier sponsor is Northwest Nazarene University and the NNU College of Business. Our annual sponsor is the University of Idaho. We also receive support from our Forum Series sponsors, AARP Idaho, Bank of Idaho, Climate Tech Corporation, Echelon Group, Micron, Pacific Source Health Plans, Small Mine Development, and St. Luke's Health System. City Club of Boise receives grant funding from the Idaho Humanities Council. Thanks also to our media partners, which include Boise State Public Radio, 670 KBOI, the Idaho Statesman, and Idaho Public Television, and our university partners, Boise State and NNU. We would like to acknowledge the ancestral, cultural, traditional, and unceded territory of the Shoshone, Bannock, and Northern Paiute people on which we are meeting today. Please remember that evening conversations in particular offer an opportunity for our guests to really spend some time responding to your questions. You can use the Q&A function of Zoom or email your question to morgan@cityclubofboise.org, and it will be provided to me. I'll do my best to present each question, but I may group similar inquiries together in the interest of time. On to our discussion. I'm going to read introductions of our two guests tonight. Senator Chuck Winder was first elected to the Idaho State Senate in November 2008 to represent District 14. Due to redistricting, he now represents Legislative District 20. He represents a small portion of West Boise and the east half of Meridian. Senator Winder was elected by the members of the Republican caucus as Assistant Majority Leader for 9 years and as Majority Leader for 3 years. For years in this leadership position, he provided support to the Republican caucus and offered valuable collaboration and corroboration to the Senate. In 2020, he was elected President Pro Tem of the Idaho State Senate. As the top-ranking official in the Senate, Senator Winder fulfills a number of responsibilities. In addition to presiding over the Senate when the Lieutenant Governor is unavailable, he is responsible for appointing the chairman of the Senate's 10 standing committees. He also makes Senate appointments to various state commissions and advisory boards. Senator Winder fills in as acting governor when the governor and lieutenant governor are out of state, and he's also responsible for decision-making along with the Senate leadership team. As pro tem, he also coordinates and works with the Speaker of the House to assure that the people's work is completed. He also works with the governor and his administration as they advance the legislature's agenda. He provides general supervision over all Senate employees and acts as an advocate for both Republicans and Democrats. Beginning his career as a civil servant, Senator Winder's portfolio included the chairman of Idaho Transportation Board, member of Credit Rating Enhancement Committee, the Governor's Housing Committee, and the Endowment Fund Investment Board. Prior to these appointments, he served on the Boise City Design Review Committee, Planning and Zoning Commission, and Ada County Highway District Commission. A proud Yote. I didn't know that you were a fellow Yote, so that's wonderful to read.
Oh.
Having graduated from the College of Idaho, Senator Winder is also a former naval aviator. He is married to the love of his life, Diane, and they have 2 children, 7 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren. Welcome, Senator Winder.
Thank you
We
very
are-
much, Jen.
You bet. We are also joined by Congressman Raúl Labrador. Congressman Labrador graduated from Brigham Young University in 1992. He then attended the University of Washington School of Law in Seattle. After law school, Raúl was a law clerk in the United States District Court for the District of Idaho. Raúl practiced immigration law in Idaho, representing a diverse clientele that included Micron Technology and other high-tech firms. After working for other law firms, he founded and managed Labrador Law Offices PC, an immigration law firm with offices in Boise and Nampa. In 2006, Congressman Labrador was elected to the Idaho legislature, where he served for 4 years. In 2010, he was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, where he served for 8 years. In Congress, Raúl was regarded as an expert on immigration reform and border security, and eventually became the chairman of the U.S. House Judiciary Subcommittee on Immigration and Border Security. He also served for 8 years on the U.S. House Committee on Natural Resources. After his service in Congress, Raúl worked as Director of Government Relations for Shape Security, a Silicon Valley-based cybersecurity company. Raúl is the managing partner and founder of the Labrador Group, LLC, and served for 1 year as the chairman of the Idaho Republican Party. He is currently a member of the Central District Health Board. Raúl and his wife, Rebecca, currently live in Eagle, Idaho. Welcome, Congressman.
Thank you.
So I wanted to start off tonight. We have some questions already that have come in, but I wanted to start off by giving each of you a chance to make a few comments on the theme of our gathering tonight, the future of the Republican Party. So Senator Winder, why don't we start with you?
Okay, thank you, Jen. Welcome, everyone. We appreciate your interest in this topic. We were actually given a couple of introductory questions that really feed into this whole question that Jen just asked. And one of those was, what changes have we noticed in the party? And I've been involved in the party since I was in college. Worked on my first campaign when I was a freshman and in college, and have watched the party. My brother have been really involved in the party over the years and served as chief of staff for Congress and things like that. So I've been really involved. I've helped many of our candidates raise money. I supported Congressman Labrador as a congressman, and thought he did a great job there. I think from the standpoint of what I've noticed is the primaries have become more closed. They're I think more controlled by the party itself, and a lot of people don't understand that our primaries are governed by the party, and the state really just accommodates that process through our code and through the elections. But I think one of the main things I've noticed is the influence of the libertarian movement, and even maybe even farther to the right than that, if that's possible, is the maybe the constitutionalists, the impact of the Idaho Freedom Foundation on our party and our politics. And then I think from the standpoint of, what are the real positives about our party? And I think people need to remember this. Republican Party is for the Republican form of government, which is a democracy where people elect their representatives to go to either Washington, D.C. or to our state capitals to represent them. That's been the basis of our government since our country started. We're elected to represent the people, and that's what we do. We believe in less government interference. Some might disagree with that when we start looking at social issues, but I think we do believe in less government interference in our lives and in government. We believe in strong public schools, but we also believe in school choice. And we think that's important, that it's up to the parents to decide where and how they want their kids to be best educated. We're for maintaining Idaho's core values of faith, family, and country. I think that's really important to, doesn't matter which side of the political line you're on, is the importance of family, the importance of our state, the importance of our country, just our core values. So we believe in lower taxes. I think we were the only state that actually gave a tax rebate. We lowered your personal income tax rate. We lowered the corporate tax rate. We've done that now twice since I've been in the legislature. We have a willingness to oppose the overreach of the federal government in BLM or Forest Service issues, and we've tried to partner with them, and we try to collaborate with them to make our forests and our public lands safer and better managed. We believe in a strong business climate where people can come and work, start their businesses. That's one of the things that's made our economy so strong is the business climate that favors startups, that favors spinoffs from the Microns and the Hewlett Packards. So I think that's an important part of it. We want to provide great opportunities for our children, for all of our citizens, so that the best of our kids stay here in Idaho. We believe in the Second Amendment protection. We think that's very important. We oppose legalization of drugs. And we get into some of those issues within our own party, where we've made attempts to have constitutional amendments or strengthen our anti-marijuana laws. And sometimes the far right becomes allied with the far left when it comes to drugs in our state. We support the first responders. We're strong supporters of the police, the firemen, and the EMTs, which is really interesting when you think about the Republican Party, and typically the police and fire are unionized, and yet in Idaho, we're protecting them, we're helping them because we think they are so important to the public safety of our citizens. And then finally, I would just say we believe in strong job growth and income improvements. I think about how much the incomes have gone up in our state since I've been here in business. I think we're growing at a fast rate, and that will continue to increase. There's tremendous competition for great employees. But I think those are just some of the things the Republicans stand for. And I think probably pretty difficult for most people to disagree with those positions.
Thank you, Senator. Congressman, I wanted to give you a chance to say a few things about our topic tonight as well before we get into our questions.
Sounds good. I'm just going to answer the question that you asked, which was, what is the future of the Republican Party? And the future of the Republican Party, I think, is strong. If you see what happened tonight, and for those of us who are watching this maybe on delayed tape or later, today is Wednesday, the day after the election that happened in Virginia. And if you see what happened in Virginia, it's what's going to happen. What's happening all across America is that the regular people are looking at how far left the Democratic Party is going and realizing that Republicans believe in small government, in less interference with business, less interference with private decisions between parents and their children and their schools. And they believe in autonomy, and they believe that the government should have as small a role in the lives of individuals as possible. That's what the Republican Party is supposed to stand for. And I think that's what the Republican Party should stand for, not just in Virginia, not just in the United States, but here in Idaho. And I think the future of the Republican Party is really strong. We always have these fights between, one wing of the party and the other. But I actually think that that's a healthy thing. The fact that we're having a debate between different wings of the party is good for the future of the Republican Party. As you have seen, people are always complaining about these fights between the two wings of the party, but the Republican Party just keeps getting stronger and stronger in Idaho. We have so many people coming from outside of the state moving to Idaho because they feel that Idaho is the place where maybe their lives and their livelihood, their businesses, their children can thrive and survive. And that's because we have a strong Republican form of government. We have a strong Republican Party, and we have a state that really protects and reveres the individual rights of people here in the state. And I think everybody around the United States understands that. And, you know, some people would say, unfortunately, that means that a lot more people are coming to the state because they're looking for those freedoms that we enjoy here in the state.
Yeah, thank you so much, Congressman. I think as I listen to both of you speak, one thing that occurs to me is I often hear from people who've lived here for a long time or whose families go back generations, that over the last few years, it feels as if the Republican Party in Idaho has sort of become unrecognizable, that their parents or grandparents who were longtime Republicans don't sort of recognize the Republican Party. And I think it has something to do, maybe Senator Winder, with what you were saying about some of the rise of libertarian influence or constitutionalist influence, and what you, Congressman, maybe described as the privileging of individual liberties above all else. So, Congressman, could you talk a little bit about what you maybe see as some of the challenges to bring some of those more maybe moderate Republicans back into the fold?
Well, I think we have a very diverse party, and that's the difference between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party at the national level. And unfortunately, you're seeing it at the state level as well. When I was in the legislature, I actually got along really well with the Democrats in the legislature. You had conservatives, moderate, more liberal Democrats, and now you're seeing the Democratic Party become more monolithic. Our party is actually much more diverse. You have a lot of different ideas. But I have to be honest with you that I find it really ironic when people say that the party has changed. If you remember your history, which a lot of people seem to forget, Ronald Reagan was supposed to be the extremist in the Republican Party. In fact, you know, everybody quotes him when they say that, you know, the 11th commandment is thou shalt not attack a fellow Republican, but they forget that he actually took on Gerald Ford when Gerald Ford was the president of the United States. So he had a very robust Republican primary with Gerald Ford, and was his argument that he was presenting to the people of the United States was that Gerald Ford and his wing of the party was not ready to lead in the late 20th century. And he used some very harsh rhetoric. He was very strong in his distinction between what he believed in and what Gerald Ford believed. Obviously, he lost that primary, but it made him the leader of the Republican Party. In fact, the history books tell us that when he gave the speech, the nominating speech at the Republican convention, most delegates looked at each other and they said, I think we nominated the wrong man. And it was clearly true, because Gerald Ford, unfortunately, was not able to win re-election. Then he became the leader in 1980 of the Republican Party. And there was the George H.W. Bush wing of the party that attacked President Reagan very vehemently. They said horrible things about him. They said that he was too extreme, that he was going to get us in wars with Russia, that he was not smart enough. I mean, if I keep going, it's all the same things that the moderates now say about the conservative wing of the Republican Party, that they're not smart enough, they're not savvy enough, they don't really understand the issues very well. And Reagan was able to win that nomination, became the most popular Republican president probably in the history of the United States, except for Abraham Lincoln. And now you talk to any Republican and they say that they were all Reagan Republicans back in the 80s. And that's just not true. They weren't Reagan Republicans back in the 80s because there was a large segment of the Republican Party that despised Ronald Reagan and everything that he stood for. And ironically, Ronald Reagan said that every Republican should be a little bit libertarian. So when I hear Republicans attack libertarians in the Republican Party, they're really attacking Ronald Reagan and they're attacking his legacy. He gave a long dissertation about how Republican principles are similar to libertarian principles. And he also said that there's some things that the Libertarian Party believes in that he doesn't believe in, and that's why he's a Republican, and I agree with him. That there's some things that the Libertarian Party believes in that we don't believe in. But I think we need to stop this division by attacking people as they don't belong in the party. I don't think that the moderate wing of the party does not belong in the Republican Party. I've never told a single liberal in the party to leave the party. I just tell them that my ideas are better than their ideas. And I'm willing to engage in the battle of ideas in the Republican Party. And I wish the moderates would stop doing that, would stop, it's ironic, Adam Kinzinger, who now has decided that he's no longer gonna participate as a congressman in Washington, D.C. He's the congressman from Illinois who's been attacking the Republican Party. He told me 3 times when I was in Washington, D.C. that I don't belong in the Republican Party because of some of my beliefs. I would never say that to Adam Kinzinger. I would never say that to Chuck Winder. I would never say that to anybody who disagrees with me on any issue. So I think it's time that we grow up as a party and we actually celebrate the fact that we have such diversity in the party and that we have young people who want to join us. I don't think we just want to be a party of older people. We want to be a party where young people are welcome and their ideas are welcome and that they're excited to participate in the process.
Okay, thank you. Senator Winder, would you like to respond?
I'd just like to remind the congressman he is over 30. So
much older.
And
thank you.
That expression in my generation is you can't trust anybody over 30. I grew up in the 60s. I would disagree a little bit with the characterization that there are a bunch of moderates in the Republican Party. I think we're made up of mostly conservatives. I think that's been proven over the years. And I think that, one of the things I always respected about the congressman was he did debate the ideals, the ideas, the philosophies, and he didn't attack people. And yet, when you look at some of the things that are going on in our own party, there are many members of our own party in the legislature, for instance, spend their whole time out raising money and bad-mouthing the Senate, bad-mouthing individuals within the Senate. And because we're just a bunch of liberals. And it's kind of crazy when you think about it, that the people in this state, I don't think they elect moderates. I don't think they elect liberals. I think they elect the people that they think will represent them the best. And we've always, and I think this is one of the differences, we've always had a big tent for our party. And we've always had strong disagreements on philosophy. Going back to, think about the start of our party with President Lincoln. Think about the issues he had to face. Think about the threats against him, the threats against the country. Our party came out of that type of turmoil. So to expect it to be free of turmoil today, I think is a big expectation, but it's also a bridge too far. I don't spend time attacking individuals. I try to attack their ideas and their philosophies, but mostly their tactics. The tactics are different today. And I've seen it, and they have been tied over the years, but the tactics are different. Today, if you can go in and dehumanize people, it's easy to attack them. I've had armed demonstrators at my door this year on 3 different times over the vaccination issue. We have no mandates, we have no mask mandate, and yet what they see going on around the country has influenced them in such a way to say, well, we really don't want this to happen, so we've got to go out and attack the individuals. And this is happening. They're not necessarily from our party, but that's kind of one of the forces that are working within our party to tear it apart. And recently you've seen several kind of prominent special interest groups leave the party, even though it's probably more conservative today than it's ever been. And it's not, in their opinion, conservative enough, or maybe not aggressive enough. I don't know what the issue really gets to be. But I think, Ronald Reagan was a rebel in lots of ways. And a lot of the arguments the congressman made about how the public attacked him and how the Democratic Party attacked him, as being just a dumb, movie matinee idol, I think was one of the things they called him. But when you think about it, his policies were good. He wanted the right things for our country. And I think, when you look at kind of the battle going on across our country today, it really is for the souls and minds of our country. But this has been going on for years and years and generation. And that's the part that scares me the most, is a lot of people say, well, we've got to stand up. We've got to have this revolution now, or we're going to lose our country. I don't believe that's what democracy is about. Democracy should be at the ballot box. It should be about citizens voting in a peaceful way, respecting others' points of view, and allowing the Republican form of government to actually work. It doesn't work well in chaos. It needs to have the input of the citizens. It needs to have the citizens feel safe to come, to participate. And so while I'll attack ideas, you won't hear me naming people. You won't hear me attacking people by name. But I will oppose when I think an organization which is a self-perpetuating and special interest group that I think is wrong and impacting our form of government, I'm going to speak out.
Senator Winder, that leads me to ask you a follow-up about that. You created some ripples, I think, several weeks ago when you called out the Idaho Freedom Foundation for having sort of maybe undue influence on party politics or politics in general in Idaho. I wonder if you'd be willing to talk a little bit more about why they pose a threat in your mind. Is it because of the rhetoric and the tactics, or is there something else going on there?
Just to clarify, while I think the Idaho Freedom Foundation is a challenge to our democracy, the point I was trying to make was that there are certain elected representatives of the people that look at and want 100% score with IFF. And to me, it's a special interest group. Should anybody vote 100% with a special interest group of any kind? I don't believe they should. And I don't, I've tried to challenge the IFF to rate the bills after people have voted. And we've seen this happen in committees. All of a sudden their cell phones light up and they got a negative score on something and they'll vote it down. And so I think that, to me, that's the threat, that people don't think it through, that they want this, kind of tribal impact and influence of this really ultra conservative group. To me, that's what I was trying to say. Maybe I didn't say it as well as I wanted to, but that was the concern I had, was the impact they were having on a certain block of voters in both the House and the Senate, more so in the House than the Senate. But they can rate the bills, rate them afterwards. Let people vote the way they feel they should. And I think you'd see some differences.
Thank you, Senator. Congressman, would you like to comment on the influence that groups like the Idaho Freedom Foundation have had or are having on Idaho politics today?
It's interesting to me. I'm not here to defend the IFF because I've had my disagreements with them on principles, on tactics, and all those things. But I find it fascinating that the media, some people in the legislature, and definitely the outside interest groups are all pointing their guns at IFF, and they're not saying anything about IACI's influence on the legislature. I think IACI's influence on the legislature is a lot more pernicious than anything that the IFF is doing. I think they rate the bills and they actually give members money. So when people are voting, they know that if they don't vote with IACI, they're not going to receive money from IACI and from their PAC and from the different businesses that are associated with IACI. IFF doesn't hand out a single dime. All they do is they try to influence policy in the legislature. And like I said, I've had my disagreements with Wayne many times. And when I have a disagreement, I'll pick up the phone and I'll call him and I tell him that he's wrong about something. And we've had some fun conversations. But I look at, I almost feel like there's people in the legislature like Senator Winder, who I probably have the highest respect of anybody that I know in the legislature for Senator Winder. I think he's a very thoughtful leader, and I have always had nothing but great conversations with him. I think they're almost giving the IFF too much power, and they're giving the IFF too much recognition. I think Wayne and the IFF are an influential member of the body politic, but I don't think they have as much influence as some people are claiming that they do. I think they have influence, but just like IACI has influence, just like the Conservation League has influence, just like the Idaho Statesman has influence, because they actually give endorsements to candidates, and there's a bunch of candidates who do anything they can so they can get the Idaho Statesman endorsement. So anyone who gives kind of a rating on votes has influence on the legislative body. And I think we should stop. And I consider myself a legislator. I love being a legislator, even though I'm not there anymore. And I think we need to stop giving them so much power over what we do. I think what we need to do is concentrate on the promises that we made. And I think this is where Senator Winder may be missing the boat a little bit, is where people are really frustrated with is that they're sick and tired of politicians making promises and not keeping them. And I'll just give you one example. The legislature promised that they were going to take away the power of the governor to act in the way that he did during this time. And they tried really hard. And I believe Senator Winder tried very hard to pass several bills that would have limited the power of the governor, and they failed. It wasn't because of Senator Winder. Senator Winder actually tried to get those bills passed, and they did not pass. And that's what people are frustrated. You know, a lot of people, and I'm sure we're going to get to this topic at some point, a lot of people don't understand why Donald Trump was so popular. And people think that Donald Trump was popular because of the things that he said, and that because he was kind of a caricature and all those things. That's not why he was popular. He was popular because he would do what he said he was going to do. He said he was going to move the embassy from where it was in Jerusalem to the Capitol, and he moved it after Republican president after Republican president made that promise, and they never did it. Anything that he said he was going to do, he tried to do, and he worked really hard to keep those promises. And I'm not asking you to agree with the policies. I'm just talking about the principle that what people are looking for are politicians, legislators, presidents, governors that actually do the things that they're going to do. And that's why people are so frustrated. And I think we should have a little bit of respect for them and not ignore them. And I'll go back to Virginia. The reason the Democrats lost in Virginia is because they sent a message that parents have no right to have any involvement in the education of their kids. And it was a really bad message for the Democrats. Then the Democratic candidate doubled down on that message. And what parents want and what individuals want, what citizens want, is to feel like they're being heard by their elected officials. And I think that's why you see the frustration that you see in the state of Idaho.
Yeah, thank you so much, Congressman. I just want to clarify a few things for folks who are listening. You mentioned IACI, that's the Idaho Association of Commerce and Industry. And you mentioned Wayne, that's of course Wayne Hoffman, who I believe is the president of IFF.
And I want to emphasize that I believe they both have a right to participate in the legislative process.
Thank you. Senator Winder, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. We actually did pass 8 bills limiting the authority of the governor. We limited the authority of the governor for extreme emergencies to 90 days. So he gets 90 days. That's all he gets. Then he has to call the legislature back. We changed a couple of simple words. It called a rising out of language, that the governor has always had to continue emergency declarations in order to qualify for federal funds. By putting a rising out of that emergency, we now comply with the federal law that says he doesn't have to continue those declarations for on and on. We said he cannot spend the money. He did, that was probably the biggest issue we had with him during that time. And we changed the law, made it clear that he cannot spend the money without our approval. And we also said he can't change laws, that he can't override the rules. We changed the powers of the central health districts. And I know that this will help, I think, what the Congressman Labrador is doing now, and that is if you have a multiple county health district, that board, who some of them are not elected officials, that if they're going to have an order that related to basically any health order, it has to be approved by the county commissioners in each of the counties. So not only did we limit the power of the governor, we limited the power of the health districts, and we also limited the power of the health and welfare director by saying he cannot quarantine healthy people. We also said that every person is essential, so that no government, no governor, no legislature can say, stay home, your job's not essential. People need to work. They need to support their family. So I disagree with what the congressman said, and it's not a criticism. I don't even think the media put all this stuff out, the various things that we did, and I think that those people that are disgruntled with the legislature, a lot of them don't even. When I tell them about these things, they've never heard this before. So I think there are a lot of things that we did that were really important to controlling the governor, controlling government, and reminding people and reminding the executive branch, yeah, he has some constitutional authority, but the power he has to do various things for emergencies really comes from the legislative branch, giving him that authority. And we basically said, we thought he overstepped it. Not saying he mismanaged. We just said he overstepped that authority, and we wanted more of a role in it. And I believe we passed 8 bills that would get us there. And he eventually ended up actually signing the bills that he vetoed earlier in the session.
Yeah, thank you so much. This might be a good opportunity to turn to some of the questions that have come in. There was a question that was posted about the COVID response. And in particular, this person noted that a number of the people, especially in recent months with the Delta surge, who have unfortunately passed away of COVID were unvaccinated, and that the unvaccinated are largely overrepresented by sort of Republican affiliation, or conservative party leaders have not strongly encouraged vaccination. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that and sort of the responsibility you feel to your constituents to encourage them to take what many view as a life-saving vaccine.
Well, I personally think it's a personal choice. I got vaccinated as quickly as I could because of my age. I don't have any medical conditions, but that would have impacted it, but I chose to get vaccinated. I think that parents have the ultimate decision for their children. I can remember I grew up at the time of polio, and my mom, I can remember mom being very concerned about polio, but she thought the risk of getting polio and the outcome of that was a greater negative than it was to go ahead with the vaccine. And you have to remember, it was a live vaccine the first round or so. So, you know, I think it's one of those things where we don't want, and our caucus particularly has said, we don't want to interfere with healthcare providers, the hospitals. There are certain employees that should be vaccinated in order to protect themselves, protect their patients. But it also goes down into the private sector, the Melaleucas of the world, the Microns of the world, the Simplots of the world that have to do business overseas. They have to have their employees meet those conditions. And if they're paying someone $300,000 a year and they won't get vaccinated, they either have to reassign them. But I think what happened with the mandates from the hospitals in particular here is they came out and did it at the same time. And they said, if you don't get, the message was, if you don't get your vaccination, you're going to get fired. And that's not right. There ought to be religious exemptions. There ought to be medical exemptions. And I think that they, have realized that. They say now that they have like 96 or 97% compliance by roughly 80 to 90% getting vaccinated, the others having exemptions. But even that, there's, 3 to 5% of the people that don't want to get vaccinated. We saw what happened in the New York Police Department and the fire department. And so there are, when you get into these large groups of employees, there's going to be a certain percentage that doesn't want to get vaccinated. And that should be their choice, in my opinion. And it's just one of those things where a lot of people would say, well, if you just vaccinate everybody, you'd get over this. But I don't know that there's real evidence of that yet.
Congressman, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, I find the premise of the question to be a little bit faulty, because I don't think we have any evidence that Republicans or Democrats are the people that are the most or least vaccinated. That may be anecdotal with this person with their friends, but there's actually no data on that. So I don't know where they got that information. But the reality is that I couldn't agree with Senator Winder Moore on the issue that the government has zero role in forcing people to take vaccines. It has zero role in telling people what kind of medicines or what kind of things they should be injecting in their body. Our responsibility is to give the public the right information, the appropriate information, and let people govern themselves, let people make decisions for themselves. That's one of the huge differences between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party wants to tell you what to do from cradle to grave. Every single step of your life, they want to tell you what to do and how to do it. And we believe in individual autonomy and responsibility. And some of that responsibility is, if you're not following good medical guidance, you may actually have some problems in your life. But I don't think we should have any role. Where I disagree with the senator a little bit, and it's not a huge difference, but I do think that the government should be careful telling businesses what kind of mandates they should have. But I do believe the legislature and the government have a responsibility to protect the individual religious and conscious rights of our citizens. And I think the legislature should do something about that. I think if a place like St. Luke's or St. Al's wants to have a mandate, or Melaleuca, that's their business. But I think I say we, and I apologize, I'm not in the government anymore, but in the legislature, they should look for a way to actually defend and protect those individual rights of people that are saying, I don't want to take this vaccine because of medical reasons, because of religious reasons, because of conscience reasons. And I think the legislature does have a role in protecting those individual rights. And I hope that they do that when they go back into session this week.
Yeah, and I think, that's a good point. And just for clarification, I don't think the government should tell employers what they can or can't do, but I do think there has to be some contractual agreement between an employer and employee as to the job they can perform and under what circumstances. Now, does that mean they should get fired if they choose not to get vaccinated? I don't believe so. I think there's chances to do other things. That one of the things that they did during the whole pandemic when they didn't have vaccine was they provided personal protective equipment.
Yeah.
Give that option to people that don't want to get vaccinated. They know their risk. Who could know it better than healthcare workers? So I think, there just needs to be, more understanding, more willingness to understand an individual's right to say, this isn't right for me, it isn't right for my child, and here's the reason why. And I think, government, in my opinion, I don't think there's anything the legislature can do about the federal employees and that executive order. We have actually worked and sent a letter previously with the House, Senate, Governor, and the Attorney General to the president, telling him we dislike his executive order and his mandate for Idaho employers with over 100 employees. We have also just joined in a suit with Georgia where we're opposing the ability of the executive order that says to contractors and subcontractors of the government that they have to get vaccinated or be subject to cancellation or modification of their contract with the federal government. We think that's wrong. And that's, you know, again, government reaching too far into the private sector to, you know, and they, one of the interesting things, and when I was in the military, they just lined us up. We didn't even know what we were getting shot with, but they would line us up with air guns and pop us twice in each arm, send us outside to exercise. And 2 days later, we back in getting another series of vaccinations. I didn't even realize that in the military, you could have some choice, but now a judge in Washington, D.C. in the appellate court there, I believe it was the appellant, it may have been just the district court, put a stay on the ability for them to require the military, active military people to take vaccinations. So it's a very movable thing. We think the best action from our perspective is in the courts because it's the federal government and these are federal issues. That, yeah, we can write resolutions, we could, you know, pass some law, but it doesn't have any potential impact on the sovereignty of the federal government. Now, if they do something that, and we think they are doing something that's wrong within the state for our citizens, we'll stand up to that legally, and we're doing that, and we're funding that effort. And so I think you'll see something hopefully come out of that in the very near future, hopefully an injunction to stop the mandate on contractors and subcontractors.
And I'm grateful that the state is doing something about that, but I think they can do more. They need to do whatever they can to stop, to take the federal government on these issues, because if you look at this administration, they're trying to use things like OSHA. OSHA was never supposed to be a department that was telling people what vaccines they should or should not be taking. And now they're using OSHA to tell employers that they have to mandate their employees to have to take vaccines. But I do think we can't miss the point. And I think sometimes the Senate dodges on this. They say, well, we're going to deal with the issue about the federal mandate, but they should deal with the individual rights of Idaho citizens and their relationships with their employers. And I think there's something, I don't know what the right solution is, then there's a couple of proposals, but I think they should do something about it, because that's the number one role of the legislature, is to protect the individual citizens of Idaho.
Thank you so much. I want to ask just one more question in this vein, and then there are a lot of questions coming in about elections, so we'll switch tack in just a moment here. But one of the questions has to do with misinformation and disinformation. They say we live in sort of a golden era for misinformation and disinformation, and that can make making personal decisions about personal responsibility or public health maybe more difficult than it was back when those first polio shots came out, for example. So, Congressman, we'll start with you. What's to be done about this infodemic, which is what sort of academics call it today, where we have a lot of misinformation circulating and even some bad actors circulating information that's incorrect?
See, what's ironic is that I want more information, not less. If you look at the polio vaccine is the perfect example. We went years with the polio vaccine where it was actually killing a lot of people. And it took several years for the polio vaccine to actually be ratcheted back, and they had to reformulate it. So there's a lot of things. I want the information. Now, I think people should be smart, and they should not listen to what their cousin said on Facebook. I mean, and that's individual responsibility to make sure that if our cousin says something that we kind of like, that maybe we go to our doctor and that we go to our medical professional and that we do our own research. So, don't just take a meme and just forward it and think that you're saving the world by doing that. But I don't believe in having less information. I think the more information that we have, the better it is for the individuals to make their decisions. At one point, and I don't know if this is still true, but at one point, the group that was less likely to get a vaccine was people with a PhD. And so, there's all this drama about whether the people that are anti-vax are, the small rural people that are less educated. The groups that were more skeptical at one point in the last few months were people with a PhD or above education. So people are making their own personal decisions. They're studying. I just had a friend who told me that his son went to the doctor, had the first vaccine, had an incredibly adverse reaction to the first vaccine. And he went to the doctor, they discovered that it was a reaction to the vaccine. And the doctor told him, don't take the second vaccine. And he's making that personal decision for him and his child. And that's a decision that should be made by the parent, not by the government. And that's why I so object to people trying to negate what's being said on the internet, on other things. And in fact, it's been ironic because yesterday's misinformation becomes today's information. The CDC continues to change the definition and the things that they say about this pandemic. And I think that's why people are so confused and people are so frustrated, because they're watching the CDC politicize an issue that should be a medical issue, not a political issue. And every couple of months, they have to correct something new that they have said in the last 2 months. So they're providing misinformation, and that misinformation is not being actually shunned by the government or the media associations. So I think we just need information, and we need to be wise enough as a people to read and to reason and to make decisions for ourselves.
Thank you, Congressman. I think those PhD numbers have changed, but
I'm sure that's why I said I don't know what they are now, but this was just a couple of months ago.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Senator Winder.
Thank you, Jen. I think the congressman hit on an important point that people need to really understand is when we started out, no one knew much about this virus. CDC said you don't need a mask. This surface transfer, direct contact transfer, a few months later, they realized that it wasn't, and that it was actually an aerosol type of exposure within the air. And they've had all of these different things, should pregnant women get vaccinated? No, you shouldn't get vaccinated. Yes, now you should get vaccinated. When you think about misinformation, you think about, whether people are trying to deliberately distort something. And to me, that's the challenge we have is how do we know what is true and what's not true? And the CDC and the government has just been walking through this thing like this, changing their position, changing the information they give to the public. And it just leads to a lack of confidence, a distrust in that whole process. And so I think that, yes, there are people out there, and, we heard about perhaps the Russians or the Chinese interfering in our elections. I would guess they're probably right in the middle of all this misinformation and trying to divide our country, trying to upset people, trying to misguide people. But I also think there are some on our own citizens for their own personal benefit or their group's benefit, change the information. There'll be a little bit of truth in it and it'll change just a little bit. And so to me, the real problem is, yeah, you can have all the information you have, but what's the truth? What are the facts? And that's, I think, where we're really having the difficulty right now in our country is what's truth and what's factual.
So we are having some questions about elections coming in, and I think generally the questions have to do with efforts since the last presidential election to limit access to the ballot box. Those are the words of the questioner that came in. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the sense among the majority of Republicans. We have polls that suggest this is true. Majority of Republicans who believe that the last election was stolen from President Trump. We'll start at the net with that national question, and then there are some questions about election security and integrity at the local level. So Senator Winder, let's start with you.
First of all, I think there are always rhetoric around elections. I think about for years, they said, well, if you're buried in the right cemetery in Chicago, you can continue to vote. And, you know, there's kind of always that undercurrent of a little bit of local or state corruption in elections. Idaho is an amazing state. We have honest people. We have good people. But I can give you one example of one of the things we did change in the last legislative session is in the last election, there were people going and asking for an absentee ballot. And then before they actually sent in their ballot, they asked for a different ballot. So the whole issue gets to be is how many ballots can a person ask for? So we limit it to one. When they ask for it, they either use that ballot or they have to go to the polls and vote. We do not send out ballots to registration databases. You have to request it in Idaho. We have good integrity, and I think in our elections. Now, are there problems in other parts of their country? There probably are. The audits that they've gone through, are they valid? I don't know, but they don't find a lot of problems. They find some problems. Did it influence the outcome of the election? Probably not, but it could have. We just don't know. And that's this whole current of what's true, what's factual, what's not, and then what does someone believe?
Senator, what do you tell people who have believed maybe their whole lives that our elections are secure and who now just in the last year maybe believe they're not? Should they continue to participate in democracy if our elections are not secure?
Well, I think democracy is more than whether, you know, there are elections that have been stolen. There are elections that have been very corrupt in the history of this country. But they're not always that way. And I think that, you know, over the years, because of the way we do our elections, they come right down to your neighbor being a judge, being a poll worker. That's where the integrity in our elections come from. And then the county clerks that certify elections, that handle the ballots. I think they're doing, at least in our state, lots of things to maintain transparency. A lot of the issues we had in other states where absentee ballots could come in for 14 days after the election and still be counted. Boy, does that lead to, you know, just questions and suspicions. So I do think we do need a national standard. You either go and vote or your absentee ballot is at the ballot on the day of the election so it can be counted in the election. And it would take away the entire argument that was made in the last election of them just bringing in, well, whatever number of votes they needed to win. And you would have known that night exactly what it was. So we've strayed in some states from good vote election integrity, and they need to get it back and protect the rights of that individual voter.
Thank you. Congressman, do you want to weigh in on this issue?
So I think you're asking about two separate issues. Number one is whether election integrity or asking for election integrity actually keeps people from voting, which is, I think, what the questioner said that we're trying to prevent people from voting. And there's absolutely no truth in that. Asking for election integrity, asking for ID, making sure that the right person is voting, that there's not an opportunity for people to ballot harvest and to go around, and there's actually currently right now in Wisconsin, there's a huge investigation about a group of people that went around to a bunch of different homes and senior centers, and they collected the ballots and they voted for those people. That should be illegal in every state. And ensuring the integrity of the ballot is I think the foremost responsibility of the Secretary of State, and it should be the foremost responsibility of the legislature when it comes to elections. So I just completely disagree with the premise and the questioner that we're trying to prevent access to the ballot. Now, second question is a little bit more difficult, was the last election stolen? And this is the way I answer that question. There were some irregularities, but I believe the election was stolen in plain sight. It wasn't stolen like some people say that ballots were stuffed and things like that. It's the way that the media and some people dealt with the election. For 4 years, we were told that there was Russia collusion, that the only reason President Trump is the president of the United States is because Russia stole the election. We had a 4-year investigation, and we came to find out that there was nothing to the claim that President Trump colluded with the Russians. In fact, we're now finding out that it was a false theory, a false idea, and it was actually promulgated by the Clinton campaign. And we spent 4 years thinking that this person was not the legitimate president of the United States. And I never saw a single Democrat complain that, hey, we didn't accept the Hillary Clinton and her supporters are not accepting the results of the last election. You saw states actually change the law in the middle of an election cycle and using the pandemic as an excuse. And they didn't change it through the legislative process. They changed it through the Secretary of State's office or the governor's office. That is illegal in most states and actually in all states. And we should ensure that that never happens again. So was there some sort of shenanigans that happened during the last elections? Absolutely. There's even an article that appeared in Politico that talked about how the unions and a bunch of different groups worked to ensure that the message of the Trump campaign was actually not going forward, and that the social media groups did not promulgate the message of the Trump campaign. There were a lot of shenanigans that happened in the last election. I do believe that that election was stolen in plain sight. But like Senator Winder said, there's still questions about whether some of the other claims that are being made, whether those claims are valid or not. And I think we're going to continue to investigate.
And Congressman, are elections in Idaho secure?
I think they are secure, but they need to be more secure. I think that anything the legislature can do to ensure the integrity of the ballot, I think is extremely important. And I think, like the senator said, they just took a step. And it happens like that you realize that some people are doing something, probably not for a nefarious reason, but we need to ensure that things like that cannot happen. And I actually when I served in the legislature, I served in the State Affairs Committee, which deals with elections. And I spent 4 years battling the Secretary of State at the time, who was a Republican, who kept coming back to Idaho with all these ideas from Democratic states. And he kept saying, we need to do all these things to make it so much easier for people to vote. And those are the things that are now getting states into trouble. So I'm glad that when I was there, we fought some of those bad ideas. And I'm glad that the State Affairs Committee in the House, and I assume in the Senate as well, continue to fight some of those bad ideas that they were trying to implement in the state of Idaho.
Yeah, one thing I might follow up on real quickly was another bill that we passed and was signed into law is that no private money can be used in facilitating or administering the elections. And there was money through the Facebook benefactors to come in, and maybe it was well intended and it was trying to help. But again, the idea that outside private money can come in and actually delve into the election process directly within an office scared us. And we said, we don't think that's right. And there's one place we can again protect election integrity.
Yeah, and interesting. I just read an article about this. The 4 states that made the decision in this last election, where the votes actually matter, and that's where the decision was made, were the 4 states that received the most money from the Zuckerberg organization, and they infiltrated a bunch of people into those states who did things that normally are not done at the election process. So I'm grateful that the legislature looked at that and did something to make sure that didn't happen in Idaho. It did happen in Idaho, and the money was accepted.
Well, there was money sent.
I'm glad it can't happen anymore.
Is that the way forward then, Congressman? So the goal is not to redo elections that are done now, right? The goal for you and for the Republican Party is to focus on making elections more secure, more rigorous moving forward. Is there a point at which you feel like the confidence of the American voter can be restored?
I hope so. I mean, you look at, I believe that we need to get the point that everybody believes in the integrity of elections. I do think that it's always going to be, politicians who lose elections, and as a politician who has lost a major election, they're painful. And sometimes you say and do things that that maybe you shouldn't say. I'm grateful that I thought I was pretty good when I lost my election, and I didn't say anything too critical. But I think sometimes you say things that that maybe you would take back. So it is painful to lose a major election, and I think sometimes you look at even to this day, Stacey Abrams is going around the United States saying that she should have been the governor of Georgia. And I think that's so inappropriate. That would be like me going around the state saying that I should have been the governor of Idaho for X, Y, and Z reason. So you're always going to have partisans do that. But I think it's important that the body politic, that the individual voters feel that the integrity of the ballot is secure, and I think we can do that. I know that we can do that in Idaho, and I hope that we can do that nationally.
Senator Winder, do you want to comment?
Well, I think I would agree, and I think our country has always been based upon a peaceful transfer of power from one administration to the next. And, I think back to the Gore-Bush election when they were looking at Chads and doing this and doing that. That was probably one of the closest elections in our history. And yet there was a peaceful transfer of power. The people allowed that to happen. And what we saw on January 6th was a disruptive process, whether it was intentional, whether it was planned. I don't know, but anytime you have a group of people that maybe come with peaceful purposes, it doesn't take very many people to change the whole tenor, the whole outcome of that group. And I think we saw that at the Capitol on January 6th. They weren't willing to have a peaceful transfer of power, whoever they were. You can dispute who they were, you can fight about who they were, but whoever they were, they did not want a peaceful transfer of power.
Senator Winder, we have a question about that. Republicans in Congress at the national level refused to support the investigation about what happened on January 6th. I wonder if you could talk more about why you think that is.
Well, it would be just purely speculation because I don't know the merits of their decision. I think from an image standpoint or a perceptive standpoint, I think it would have been better to have a bipartisan effort, but they chose not to. I don't know their motives. I don't know their reasons. So I can't speak to that. I personally would like to have seen them have a bipartisan. I think it would have been a fairer outcome. And because it isn't really a bipartisan effort, it's going to be perceived as the Democratic Party going after Trump, going after, the Republican Party. So, the congressman knows some of the individuals that are there. I'm sure he's talked to them. He can probably address this question a lot better than I can.
Okay, Congressman, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, it was for a simple reason. It was not a bipartisan committee. It was a committee made up of both parties, but all the rules favored the Democrats in that sense. Usually a commission like that allows both sides to have equal power, equal authority, allows them to have subpoena power and other things. And I think that's, and I don't know all the details, but I'm just talking about in general, there was a feeling in the Republican conference that the rules did not really empower the minority to do their job. And I think they also, if I remember correctly, and this was a while back, so if I'm wrong, I apologize, but I believe the Republicans wanted to expand the focus a little bit to talk about any kind of effort to undo elections, not just the January 6th efforts, but I think that their main concern was that the rules, because every time you form a special committee like that, you have rules that have to be promulgated on how that committee is going to function. And they felt that the rules that were promulgated did not give enough power to the minority to be treated fairly and to ask the right questions and to subpoena the right people.
Thank you, Congressman. Another question for you then. Some questions coming in about President Trump, former President Trump, potentially being the party's nominee for the next presidential election. Do you view him as the leader of the Republican Party nationally?
Oh, he's clearly the leader of the Republican Party. He was the last president-elect. I think the last president-elect is always the leader of the Republican Party or the Democratic Party until there's a new person that is elected. The only time I haven't seen that is with Biden, who just a joke, Obama continues to be the leader of the Democratic Party. But no, I think whenever you have a president-elect and they lose, and we don't have the executive, the previous president, Republican president is, or Democratic president is the leader of that party. I think that it's really important for Republicans, and this goes back to your initial question about the divide in the party. There's a lot of people that are trying to move away from President Trump. And I think it's fine to move away from his style and rhetoric. I think it would be a huge mistake for Republicans to move away from the principles that he espoused and the principles that he advocated. In fact, if you could go back to what happened yesterday in Virginia, you had a person who had a totally different personality and style, but he was happy to have the Trump endorsement. He embraced many of the things that Trump believed in, and he did not disassociate himself from President Trump, even though he was a totally different person when it came to his style and his mannerisms and presentation. And I think I'm seeing too many Republicans who are saying we need to move away from President Trump. Well, I have a pretty strong message for them, is that President Trump is the first Republican in a long time that saw his Hispanic vote go up, that so many other groups get behind them. He had union members in the Northeast of the United States. He had blue collar workers coming to the Republican Party. There's something that really resonates from Trump's message to the average working Americans. And I think that we as a party need to not be the party of big business. We need to be the party of everyday working Americans. And I think that's one thing that people really appreciated about Donald Trump. And so yes, is he the party leader? Absolutely. I don't know whether he's going to be the nominee. I'm not really sure whether he's going to run. We have some amazing people that are leaders in the United States right now. I really like the governor of Florida. He's a good friend. We were actually neighbors in the House of Representatives. Our offices were right next to each other. I know him very well, and he's a fantastic governor. We have other people throughout the United States. We have some really strong leaders. I think with last night's election, if I'm doing the math correctly, I think we have 27 Republican governors in the United States. So we have some energy in the Republican Party. If you look at the new lieutenant governor from Virginia, she was amazing if you watched her speech last night. The first African-American lieutenant governor of the state of Virginia, she's a Republican. The attorney general is the first Hispanic attorney general in Virginia. He's Cuban-American. I mean, we have such a strong diversity in the party and so many good people in the party. And I think we need to look forward. We need to understand why Trump appealed to people, and we need to have strong leadership in the future.
Thank you, Congressman. Senator, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, just quickly, I think the congressman made a great point about trying to separate maybe the personality of Donald Trump from the policies of Donald Trump. President Trump did a lot of really good things for Idaho and for the West. He lowered the temperature of the differences between the ranchers and the BLM. He lowered the temperature between the Forest Service and the local businesses and government. So he's done, his policies have done a lot, I think, to represent what the Republican Party is. From the standpoint of, just his rhetoric, his personality. I think, we even saw it in the race in Virginia, where I don't think they were ever seen together. But he, as the congressman said, he stuck to those policies. He stuck to those concepts. And so I think from that aspect, Donald Trump still is the leader of the party because of his principles. Even when he was elected the first time, and even when he was voted for the second time, there were lots of people that didn't like his style or his rhetoric, but they loved his policies. And the first time around, a lot of people voted for him because they didn't like Hillary. And I think the second time around, a lot of people didn't vote for him because they didn't like him. So, I mean, it's kind of interesting when you see the ebb and flow of that. But I think he definitely still is the strong man of our party. He is the central point of the rhetoric, the ideas, the media. So I agree. We've got to, again, work with the policies, find good leaders, and there are a bunch of them out there. The congressman's right about that.
Senator Winder, could you talk about who you see as the leader of the party in Idaho?
I don't think there's any doubt about it that, the governor is the leader of the party. I think there are struggles, there are power struggles within the party itself, and there are groups that, are maybe regionalized around the state that, oppose him, even though there's never been these mandates or mask requirements or things like that. Because of what's going on at maybe at the school district level, the district health issues, those kind of things. He gets blamed for a lot of it. But I also think when you think about how well our state has done, we thought there would be probably a 17 to 20% revenue reduction with COVID by not closing our state down, by keeping it going, allowing people to work. We actually saw almost a 20% increase in revenue. Because of those practices, people are moving here. They're flocking here by the thousands because they like liberty. They like the way it's run, they like lower taxes. They like less government interference. And so from that aspect, I think that Governor Little is the leader of the party, but it'll be a struggle no matter who it was, whether it was Butch Otter or there's always this push and pull within the party, and I think that's good. There's supposed to be some tension there.
Congressman?
Well, he's clearly the leader of the party because he's the governor and he has the biggest bully pulpit. And I think he will continue to be if he wins re-election. I do think that he would be even more popular. There are some things that other governors are doing in the United States. And again, I hate to mention Ron DeSantis again, but I think if you look at some of the things that Ron DeSantis did, where not only did he not institute mandates, but he prevented the cities, the counties, the schools from having these mandates. I think that's why people appreciate his leadership so much. And you know, I always hear that the governor didn't institute mandates, but the reality is that he also didn't do anything to stop some people from doing them. And I think we had businesses shut down in the state and many other things that affected people's lives. You know, we have restaurants that are closing almost on a daily basis. We have so many issues that are happening. But there's no question about who the leader of the party is right now, and it's usually the highest elected official. Just like my answer about Trump, it's going to be usually the highest elected official who at the time.
Okay, we have a couple sort of issue-specific questions. So I am going to ask each of you one last question, but a different one for each of you, just so we can maybe get to a few more of these before we end. So Congressman, we'll start with you because of your expertise in immigration policy. Could you talk a little bit about what you see as the current Republican platform with regard to immigration policy today?
It's simple, 2 words: legal immigration. Republicans believe in legal immigration. They believe in a system of rules and of laws that people follow. They believe in having the proper incentives and having border security. You know, we tried with the 8 years. My biggest regret in Congress was that for 8 years, I tried to bring Democrats to the table to pass a bill that had the proper border security and enforcement with the proper reform of the current immigration system. We could never get them to the table on those issues. They always wanted to do what they did in the 80s. They wanted amnesty first, and then they would do something about border security. And they didn't want to change any of the rules that are encouraging people to come to the United States illegally. And now this administration has doubled down and has pretty much told everybody in the world that if they come to the United States, the laws are not going to be enforced. That's why you see the disaster that we're seeing at the border. And what people don't realize is, you know, you see all these people coming to the border. What that means is that people are suffering because of that. You have women and children that are being abused, women and children that are being mistreated because these cartels are taking advantage of them, and they're telling them that unless they allow them to do these horrible things to them, they're not going to help them to come to the United States. They're taking money from their families. There's so many horrible things that are happening. And, you know, a lot of people think that they're being compassionate by saying that it's okay, we're not going to do anything to you if you come to the United States. It's actually the opposite of compassion. It's something that is causing people to really suffer. And then you're giving people false hope that they can come to the United States and stay here legally, and they're going to get a green card. So I believe that hopefully, you know, now that people are seeing what happens, the 4 years that Trump was in the White House, we were able to stop the inflow of illegal immigration. The number of arrests went up. You had some good issues that were happening, and we were actually negotiating and trying to get to some good immigration reform. But I think that people are understanding that not enforcing the law is creating a huge problem for the United States and is creating a huge devastation at the border. And I think that's why I'm pretty sure that we're going to have huge victories in 2022 in Congress.
Thank you. All right, Senator Winder, the question for you is, there's been a lot of discussion tonight about individual liberties, particularly with regard to the vaccine. There's a question that came in about sort of maybe feeling that there's a contradiction between arguing for individual liberties and body autonomy around vaccines, but not around women's right to choose in the abortion issue. And I wonder if you could talk about how you square that.
Well, it's very difficult to square, in my opinion. I've been for pro-life. I've, voted for pro-life issues the entire legislative career. And now the same people that are saying you can tell a woman not to have an abortion are saying, but I can tell that I don't want to have a vaccine. So to me, the argument is difficult, but the result is, for me, and this is where I came down on it, was an abortion takes a life. By not taking vaccine, you may be saving a life. So to me, that's the way I squared it. But you'll see the people that don't want to get vaccinated say it's my body, it's my body autonomy. You'll see the pro-choice movement. That's been their argument for years. But to me, it comes down to an abortion takes a life, vaccination doesn't.
You broke up a little bit, Senator, so I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. Did you say that taking a vaccination does not save a life, or it might not?
No, I'm saying it doesn't take a life.
Okay.
So to argue the same, use the same wording, and I've talked to my pro-life people and groups about it, that to me, it fuels and gives more argument to the pro-choice people, because they're using the same argument. So, but to me, the argument comes down to an abortion takes a life, taking the vaccine doesn't. Does it mean that there are exposures to that person? Yes. Does it mean that they may transfer, that disease or other disease? Yes, it does. But that's the difference. And I know that there are people that are saying, well, you're hypocrites when you argue one way over here and one way over here. But to me, it comes down to taking a life or the individual choice of not taking the vaccine.
Can I say something real quick about that? And I'll be very brief. I would even put it even more simple. The abortion affects a different body. The vaccine only affects your body. You are having body autonomy. You're saying that I don't want the government to tell me what to inject in my body. Having an abortion actually affects two bodies, the body of the mother and the body of the baby. And like the senator said, that's taking the second body and it's affecting that second body. So I just don't even see them as the same.
Congressman, if I could just ask a follow-up on that, since you jumped in.
Yes.
There are those who might say, well, COVID is a communicable disease, and by not choosing to vaccinate the way generations before have, you might be putting others at risk, right? By continuing to spread a disease, which is landing people in hospitals. So it isn't just one body, right?
But abortions kill people 100% of the time. The vaccine, not taking the vaccine does not. 1% of the population is infected. The people who die because of COVID, even though every death is tragic, the numbers are not comparable to what happens. The result of every abortion is the taking of a life.
And it's really interesting, Jen, too, that hospital workers for years have taken rubella vaccines, the flu vaccine annually, but this one's different, and it's because of, I think, the CDC in lots of cases. It started out as emergency, experimental. It's just that whole misinformation or lack of factual information that leads people to have more suspicion about it. And so where they would take a flu shot, which is, some would say, is all very similar to this because they're dealing with viruses. But on this one, it's different because it doesn't have some of those sideboards, the longer term analysis. And so you kind of go, well, maybe this one is a little different. I personally would like to see more people get vaccinated because I think it would help them. I've had friends die from it. I had a great granddaughter that got the COVID syndrome and was in the pediatric intensive care, and we almost lost her. So this disease is real, but it still comes down to people's rights. And then you think back to our whole Declaration of Independence, we the people, and they gave the rights to the government. The states gave and the colonies gave the rights to the federal government. And those rights that aren't specifically given are retained by the states. And we just feel right now the president is overstepping that, and we're going to fight against that.
Thank you, Senator Winder. I'm touched by you sharing that story about your family, and I wish you the best and your family the best as well. Thank you so much to both of you for participating tonight with City Club of Boise, and thanks to everybody at home for joining us and asking such great questions. We will see you at our next event. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks.